Need some new Kamigawa Neon Dynasty cards? Well, you can get them from our amazing sponsor, Card Kingdom, by heading over to cardkingdom.com/MTG Goldfish and even get a free goldfish sticker. Just let them know you want one in your order notes and they'll hook you up. Hello everyone, it's Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and it is time to move from the hypothetical gut reaction world of spoiler season and actually start talking about what cards from Kamigawa Neon Dynasty are going to see play in various constructed formats. So for the next few days, I'm going to be joined by the ever awesome Crim. How's it going today, Crim?
Yo, Seth, what's up? Neon Dynasty, an amazing set, one that we've been waiting for, and on top of that, one that I might even potentially be canon in because I'm in a visual novel of it. So does that mean I'm canon in this world? Okay, whatever.
I think it is. Crim is officially a magic character now. That's awesome. So today we're going to be counting down the top 10 Kamigawa Neon Dynasty cards for standard. And the way we do this, like we do every spoiler season, is Crim and I both make a list of our top 10 cards. You can see our individual lists in the article on the mtggoldfish.com website. It's linked in the description. And then we kind of mash it together for our top 10 list. This time for standard, we had pretty wide agreement on the top like 5 or 6 cards, some of them in slightly different orders, but we pretty much agreed that those were the best cards from the set for standard. And then we got a few random picks towards the end that one of us liked or the other one liked. So that's what we got for today. And I guess we just jump right into it and start counting them down. Yeah. So coming in at number 10 on our list, we have a sweet green mythic, KODAMA of the West Tree. Crim, I know you really like this card, and I like this one too, but why don't you tell us a little bit about what you're envisioning for this one in standard?
So first off, let me just state that I am picking this because it's a powerful card, not because I like this card. Okay,
that's true. It is green. I misspoke there. There's no way you like it because it's a green card, but it is powerful, right? Yeah, even you can overcome your biases with green and be like, wow, this card's pretty strong.
Actually, all my biases point to everything green being strong. So, but legitimately, this does stand out, right? Because this is a 3-mana 3/3 with reach, and then modified creatures you control have trample. So modifying is an equipment, an aura, or even counters. Anything, like a menace counter, a 1/1 counter, anything along those lines means the creature's modified. And then when a creature is modified, you control deals damage to a player, search your library, and ramp. Get a basic land, and then put it in play tapped. This is just going to be a big threat. Like, this is going to be something that's going to help you accelerate. It's going to give all your creatures that have like any kind of counters or anything on it trample. Mono green already has something in standard right now that I consider a problematic card in Ranger class, which already has the second chapter, which gives counters. So it's not hard to throw this somewhere in there. I don't know how much you want to ramp, but on the brighter side of things, you can pump your layer of the Hydra with all the additional land, plus deck thinning is always nice. So I just think that overall in standard, if this doesn't take off right away, this has to be good at some point, just because of how powerful anything that's modified is able to just get trample and dig through your deck for lands.
Yeah, I mean, I very much agree. I think KODAMA of the West Tree is just a really powerful card. Even outside of like playing in mono green with Ranger class, I think that in constructed, a lot of times modified is going to be +1/+1 counter decks. That's what this screams out for me. And we have a lot of synergies. We have a lot of 1-drops that just are like 0/0s that come into play with a counter. We have Luminarch Aspirant. We have Felidary Retreat. There's a lot of ways to put counters on your team. So I could imagine a +1/+1 counter theme deck merging with KODAMA of the West Tree being a centerpiece. And like you said, even if your deck isn't a ramp deck, and maybe because you're playing this, you could ramp a little bit and try to play like Vorinclex or something that you wouldn't normally play in a deck like that. But as you mentioned, like Lair the Hydra is a good mana sink. We have other creature lands that you could play in the deck. So you're probably going to find something to do with the mana. And even though I'm a deck thinning skeptic, if you can ramp all the lands out of your deck, like that actually does shift the math. Like any individual land, whatever, that doesn't really change the percentages that much. But if you're getting 4, 5, 10 lands out of your deck, that actually does really shift the math in favor of you drawing more action and less lands. So
fair. Yeah.
Anyway, let's move on. Number 9 on our list, and this is the Crim special, NASHI Moon Sage's Scion, one of the hottest new ninjas from the set, the Mythic Ninja. This is a card that wasn't on my list, although I think it's a card that I cannot wait to ninjutsu into play. But Crim, I want to hear what you're thinking with this one in Standard.
I mean, let's be honest here. I love the idea of stealing stuff from your opponent's deck. Maybe the only time this isn't going to be good is maybe against mono white, where nothing you do like synergizes like out of the mono white deck with your deck. But for the most part, it's a 3 mana with ninjutsu for 4. And whenever NASHI Moon Sage's Scion deals combat damage to a player, exile top card of each player's library until end of turn. You may play one of those 2 spells. If you cast spell this way, you pay life equal to its mana value rather than paying its mana cost. So the good news here is you get whatever at the cost of life. So if you find some kind of haymaker, some kind of bomb, that's yours now. You get a planeswalker off that. You get anything at all. You can choose because you are looking at the top 2. And on top of that, I know it may not seem like much because it's just a 3/2, right? But if it's able to connect again, this doesn't require you to like remove any counters or it's like a one-time ETB thing. This is just when it connects to a player, you get to do it again and again. And so that means if you're in a ninjutsu deck, you have a way of returning this back to your hand to continuously draw off your opponent's deck. And there's already cards like Siphon Insight, so most of the time you can probably just play a bunch of your opponent's deck, which then makes you wonder why wouldn't you just play their deck? But the thing here is I think this is just going to be something nifty, especially in like a control mirror or something like that. If this isn't going to be directly in the main board, this is at least something worthwhile in the sideboard, as that way it is great in a control deck. Or against a control deck.
Yeah, that's true. Against a control deck that doesn't have blockers, this can snowball really hard. I think, this has got to be the best Ophidian of all time. Like, this card is, like, 4 3-drop that hits your opponent and draws a card. It's way above the curve because you're casting that card for free. So the card is really exciting. My main worry with it is I feel like a lot of times, unless you really build around it, like you mentioned, that you're only going to get in 1 hit with it because it is just a 3/2. You're going to get in the ninjutsu hit because that's kind of the upside in ninjutsu. But then the next turn, it seems like it's going to be hard to keep getting in those repeatable hits. So we'll have to wait and see, I guess. So that's my main worry, is it just getting stonewalled? And what if your initial hit is like 2 lands or a 1-drop in a land or something? That's a little bit disappointing. So I think the card's really, really sweet, but it does seem a little tricky for me to from my perspective, to actually snowball outside of, as you mentioned, like some sort of ninja deck where you're able to repeatedly be picking it back up and using it again. So, but still,
even just hitting lands, you're still able to play those lands.
And it doesn't even cost you any life. And we've seen Bolas's Citadel be really, really powerful. This is kind of like a one-shot Citadel on a relatively on-curve body. The only thing I would want is like maybe some sort of evasion, like Shadow Mage Infiltrator style evasion. Like that is the one thing that would really sell me on it. But even without evasion, like in a ninja deck, this card is pretty bonkers. And you can obviously live the dream of like hitting a coma or just like some ridiculous big thing. And then it just kind of wins the game in 1 attack by itself. Yeah.
Yeah, like most ramp decks don't do anything early anyways, except for just continuously ramp, right? So if you're able to steal a bomb, they've got to deal with that bomb now. Yeah.
Well, let's keep moving on. Number 8 on our list. We got a card that I'm really high on, which is Invoke the Ancients. Invoke the Ancients, 5 mana sorcery, make 2 4/5 spirits, and you get to choose Vigilance, Trample, or Reach, and give it to each of those. So this is a card that excites me.
Modified, by the way.
Ooh, it is modified. So combos with our number 10 on the list with KODAMA the Westry. But even discounting the modified synergies, this is just a lot of raw stats. Like 5 mana to make 2 4/5s, even in 2022, is way above the curve. And there's also like not a ton of competition in the green 5-drop slot. You got Ren and 7, which is really good. But beyond that, like people are playing Froghemoth or something. That's 1 4/4. This is 2 4/5s. My only concern is they are tokens, which can be a drawback in a world of like Fading Hope, for example, like bounce spells getting them. But still, they're big enough. You put the reach counter on them, it stops Goldspan Dragon. You put the trample counter on them, you're going to smash through a bunch of little white creatures to like close out the game. So this card really excites me just based on its rate. It's so far above the curve. But I'm rambling on. What do you think about Invoke the Ancients, Crim?
Actually, this was also pretty close to making it on the list for me. Just because, just like you had mentioned, it's raw stats with the flexibility of the counter of your choice, no matter what the matchup. And with, Alrun's Epiphany just getting the axe, this means that we're probably going to see a lot more gold span, so why not have 2 4/5s that can block it? Right? Yeah. And like, at the end of the day, if they're bouncing one of these, yes, sure, they are bouncing it, but then the thing is, that's 2 bounces, because there's 2 rhinos attached to this. Or sorry, 2 green spirit creature tokens, whatever. To me, anything that's a 4/5 is a rhino. It's fine. but yeah, like, I think this is pretty major. This is gonna be a good one, and it looks like it's gonna be, like with this whole invoke cycle, it's gonna be something very much in a monocolor deck. So, this looks solid. This looks like an amazing rate.
And we already got mono green is a real deck in standard. So there's even already like a pre-built home where you can just kind of toss this in on the top end of your curve and it'll probably be pretty good.
Yeah.
Let's keep moving forward. Number 7 on our list. We're going back to the world of ninjas, but this time ninja planeswalkers in Kaido Shizuki. Crim, you like the ninjas. Why don't you tell us a little bit about this one in standard?
I am in love with this card. Just because, first off, I don't think we've had like a ninja catered planeswalker like this.
No.
And this is like the first time to get one, and it's such a cool card at it because, well, first off, it's 3 mana, and it has this super sweet passive. At the beginning of your end step, if Kaido entered the battlefield this turn, he phases out, meaning that he's not exactly the easiest to deal with the turn he comes down, unless you deal with him on the stack or remove before the end step. Otherwise, it's not like you're gonna hit him, because then if you get him back, yeah, he doesn't protect himself, right? But you know what? That's fine, because draw a card, then discard a card unless you attack this turn, right? That's great. -2, make a 1/1 ninja. This creature can't be blocked, unblockable. And -7, I don't even factor those into when I evaluate the card, just because usually it's very good, right? And some kind of emblem, whenever a creature control deals combat damage to a player, search your library for a blue or black creature card, put it on the battlefield. Great news. But for me, the first 2 abilities, along with the just the constant like ability to just generate a body, it's great in the grindy matchups, like let's say a control matchup or something like that, where you're gonna need to make sure, like, honestly, if I were also playing control, I would sideboard a few of these just for fun, because the -2 gives you a clock, and then the plus gives you card advantage and card filtering. So it goes in a ninja deck, it goes in a tempo deck, it can go in a control deck, it's whatever you want it to be. It doesn't protect itself, so that's its biggest weakness. And other than that, I mean, it's nothing too crazy, like when it comes to like flashy abilities, but it does what you want it to do for a ninja planeswalker and for 3 mana, and it protects itself by not being there the turn you play it.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, actually, is like, even though it doesn't directly protect itself, the fact that you can play this, and how I imagine you most commonly will play this, especially on an empty board, is play it, tick down to make a ninja, phase it out, untap, then you can uptick in plus to start drawing cards with your unblockable ninja, which is really powerful. Yep. But I think that phasing out ability actually is a good form of protection, because it means it's not going to get immediately killed by an attack, and you're going to, once it comes back, have all your mana available. So you're actually going to be able to use your mana to defend it, either with spells, removal spells, or by playing more creatures. So even though it doesn't defend itself in the way a traditional planeswalker does, I think that static phase out ability is a good amount of protection. And I love planeswalkers that have plus abilities that draw cards. Like, traditionally, those are really powerful effects. And even though you kind of got an extra hoop to jump through where you need to be attacking, especially in a ninja deck, or even without, just because of the -2 making this unblockable ninja, I think this is pretty consistently going to be +1 draw a card, which is exactly where you want to be to like snowball your value and pick up wins. So I think this card is probably the best planeswalker from the set for standard. But sorry, Crim, go ahead.
Well, yeah, and then we also have like tons of ways to bring things back with Agadeem's Awakening and stuff like that in standard. Draw a card, then discard a card unless you attack this turn.
Yeah.
Sometimes, as we've learned in the past, discarding a card isn't necessarily a drawback always. So, there's lots of applications here. And because you had mentioned, like, that's why I think just this card on its own can be a sideboard. Like, back when Control used to just bring in random things, right, out of the sideboard as an additional win con. This could totally be something.
Yeah, I agree. I think this card has a lot of possibilities, from control sideboards to main deck and ninjas and standard. So definitely a really sweet planeswalker. Let's move on. Number 6 on our list. We have our first vehicle. And I gotta say, I think vehicles are probably the strongest part of the set outside of lands, like overall. And we have MUKOTAI SOULRIPPER, which is a vehicle
MUKOTAI.
MUKOTAI. So that probably that's probably way more correct. MUKOTAI SOULRIPPER, which is a card I'm really, really high on, to the point where this is, I think, like number 2 on my list or something. It's very, very high on my list for standard. It's a 2-mana 4/3. It grows as it attacks if you sacrifice something, and it gains menace. I was thinking about old vehicles that were actually really, really good in standard and other formats, and you're kind of looking for, I think, 3 things. You're looking for, number 1, above the curve stats, like a 2-mana 4/3. You're looking for evasion. Pretty much all the staple vehicles are evasion. Menace, not the best evasion, but still, it is a form of evasion. And then you want an additional upside. In this case, getting +1/+1 counters. So for me, this kind of checks all the marks of a constructed playable vehicle. And when you think about our current standard format, I'm even higher on this card. Because remember, when this attacks, you can sack an artifact or a creature to put a counter on it and give it menace. We're in a world of blood counters and treasure tokens.
Yep.
There's a lot of relatively useless or somewhat useful artifacts that are just kind of chilling on the battlefield. So in a deck that's built around those themes, and plus we got eye twitches and shambling gas, which are good sack fodder.
I was going to say that right there.
Yeah, if you're built around any of those themes, it seems really easy to feed this every single turn without losing anything meaningful. It's not like you got to sack, a good card. You can just sack a random blood token. So I think MUKOTAI SOULRIPPER is actually going to be MUKOTAI. So whatever. SOULRIPPER is going to be a very good card in standard. But what do you think about this one, Crim?
Yeah, I definitely feel that it's going to be a powerhouse because it's just a sack outlet and it grows. And one thing we've learned about vehicles is that it's so good against things that are trying to sorcery speed remove things. So you'll now have the addition of these wonderful vehicles plus creature lands, right? So the combination of that now means opponents will have to have a critical mass of instant speed removal. So Bloodthirsty, Blood Chief's Ascension, Bloodthirsty Ascension, the 1-mana Sword of Fatal Push, but for Planeswalkers too. That's just not going to cut it anymore. As vehicles enter the format and now like creature and with creature lands, yeah. All you got to have everything instant. And this card is one of those things where it's going to grow. And when it grows too far out of range of like a red burn spell, like let's just say a Frostbite, that's it, right? Like how are you going to deal with that? So, this card is going to really, really make it so that now, and like this plus all the vehicles will make it so instant speed removal will be an all-time high moving into the new format.
Yeah, Braid going way up in value. Stuff like that I think is going to be much, much more important in the format. Also, Wraths probably get a little bit worse too. That's one thing we learned last time we had vehicles in standard, that they stick around through a Wrath and then your opponent plays some Dork and crews them up and you get smashed again. So not that those cards are unplayable, but I think the way that reactive decks are going to be built in our new standard format going to be a lot different than the way they were built before we had all these vehicles running around.
It's making me look at now Sphere of Annihilation again, to be a potential, thing.
Yeah, no, that makes it. And like Farewell, maybe that goes up in value as a Wrath that can get rid of all the vehicles alongside getting rid of all the creatures. So gonna be interesting once we see how this shakes out. But let's keep moving on. Moving on to number 5 on our list. We're going from vehicle into vehicle. Vehicle number 2, MINOLINK MECH. Another vehicle I like a lot, but this one I know is very high on your list, Crab. Why don't you tell us a bit about this one in standard?
I'm a huge fan of MINOLINK MECH because it's got crew 1 there at the bottom, so it's very easy to crew. It's got flying, it's a 4/3, and when it becomes crewed for the first time each turn until end of turn, MINOLINK MECH becomes a copy of target non-legendary creature that crewed it this turn, except it's a 4/3. So, it'll retain all of its types, along with it being a vehicle artifact and has flying. So, that's pretty major because now you can cruise with like some pretty sweet normal attacking creatures, and then just get in there, like just without risking losing your like main threat from surprise blocks or anything like that. So, this just seems like a powerful clone that's attached to a vehicle that can be crewed for 1. So the crew for 1 will be the biggest things going in its direction. And again, like if you take any 1-drop that you think just like isn't that great, or maybe it would be better but it just lacks the stats and can't get through. In this case, let's just say, like, remember how we talked about NASHI? If NASHI needed a little bit more of evasion, this gets flying. Of course, it would be non-legendary, so it'd have to be some kind of non-legendary creature. But I just love that you have the flexibility of doing that.
Yeah, I mean, for me, this checks all the marks of what I'm looking for a standard playable vehicle. 4/3 flyer for 3 above the curve, straight up flying for evasion, upside of cloning something that crews it. You mentioned Nashi. I actually think that Ninjas is a really sneaky home for this because they have a lot of these combat damage triggers, but a lot of them are tough to keep getting in hits with because after you ninjutsu them, they're not that big on the battlefield. So ground blockers can hold them off. This seems like a really cool vehicle for a ninja deck or anything else that has, you know, attack triggers, combat damage triggers, because this is a way to get a flying version of a creature that maybe just can't get in that consistently. But even discounting the clone effect, I mean, even just a 4/3 flying vehicle with crew 1 for 3, even that I think is pretty close to being constructed playable. And then you just get this bonus cloning effect that sometimes is going to be really good. Other times you don't even care. You're just going to beat your opponent down in the air with this thing.
Yeah.
Let's keep moving on to number 4 on our list. We have a card that I think people might be sleeping on a little bit for standard. Thundering RAIJU. To me, this card reads absolutely bonkers. 4 mana 3/3, but it puts a counter on something when it attacks. It is haste, and then when it when it attacks, it deals X damage to each opponent, where X is the number of modified creatures you control other than Thundering RAIJU. So this is a 4/4 haster for 4. Very playable stats. And then it's kind of a Hell Rider, essentially, if you're playing a modified deck. Add those things together. Think of a questing base. Think of Uvenwald Oddity. These are 4/4 hasters for 4. That's the floor. And then you're also getting this upside where maybe you're throwing a bunch of direct damage at your opponent's face. I think this card is absolutely bonkers for standard. But Crim, what do you think about this one?
Well, you know, here's another 4 mana red threat in standard. There's a surplus of them, and all of them are pretty good, and some of them haven't seen play yet, but I don't know. I mean, Thundering RAIJU, I feel like you don't have to do much to set up that back half there because things will just naturally be, you know, like kind of modified already. You can go like now, like what, Boros or Lorehold, whatever you want to call it. And then you'll have the little like 2-drop that puts a 1/1 counter at the beginning of combat and stuff, right? So like there's so many things that can really make this more painful than a Hell Rider if you really wanted it to be. But yeah, like this, it's been a while since we had something this powerful and this aggressive. So I love it. I think it's going to be a sweet card. The only concern is it's a 4-drop, and we know that currently in standard, even after the bannings and everything, there's a surplus of 4-drop red threats. So we're going to see where this falls in, but I think this is an amazing card.
I will say the reason I'm high on this compared to some of the other red 4-drops, and you are right, there's a million of them. Haste is really big. Haste and getting in some amount of direct damage right away. I think that swings things a little bit in favor of this seeing play in the right deck. But you are right. There are about 1 million really powerful dragons. If you go back and watch our past top 10 list, they were probably on our top 10 list. And a lot of those haven't even really taken off in standard yet. So there is reason to be skeptical, but I gotta think this card's going to find a home somewhere.
This is a spirit. You do have that Lorehold Spirit Lord dude, the Hoffrey. So I don't know, maybe who knows.
That actually sounds super sweet. Well, let's keep moving on. Number 3 on our list. Oh, this card's so good. Biting Palm Ninja. 3 mana 3/3 that Thought Seizes the first time it hits your opponent. It gets a menace counter, and then you remove that counter to essentially Thought Seize, take a non-land from your opponent's hand. This card, I think, is wow.
This is not Thought Seize. You're exiling it. That's
even
way major.
And you don't lose life, so it's an upgraded Thoughtseize. Crim, I know you love the ninjas. What do you think about Biting Palm Ninja?
This has to be like probably one of the top 3 cards for me, like in the whole set. Right? Just because of how efficient this card is. It comes down, like when it attacks, if you don't remove the counter, it already has the menace, and you remove it, sure, you get to exile something. And knowing ninjutsu, it's very easy to return it back to your hand if you have more ninjas to do that with. And then, of course, the cool thing that's here is that the ninjutsu cost doesn't cost more, than the casting cost. Like Nashi costs 4, right? As opposed to its natural cost, which is 3. This is just 3 across the board. And it's a pretty solid stat line of just a 3/3 body, whereas most ninjas you'll see is like a 1/1, a 2/3, maybe something like that, right? Or a 2/1. Something that blocks and gets chumped in trades, unfortunately. But this goes hard. And on top of that, this exiles. So in a world of memory deluge and all these other things, you get rid of that stuff permanently, and that's big. We already see like Elite Spellbinder, right? We talked about that. We see cards like that get played. this is just better. I think this is just going to be great.
Yeah, I mean, that was kind of the comparison I was going to make for Standard. We see Elite Spellbinder being a staple, and that doesn't even really get rid of the card. It just taxes it 2 mana, so eventually it's going to be cast anyway. Vendilion Click is a card that's been a staple in older formats for a long time. These 3 mana plays that do some sort of hand disruption, pseudo Thoughtseize style effects, have traditionally been very, very strong, and I think this is a good one. I think that this is the best ninja for Standard. This is the reason to build a ninja deck for Standard. And more importantly, I think this card is so strong, I don't even think you have to be a ninja deck. Like, if you're playing some sort of Golgari deck with a bunch of eye twitches and other just evasive creatures so you can ninjutsu this pretty consistently, I think this is good enough to see play in those decks as well. So I'm expecting to be seeing a lot of Biting Palm Ninja in Standard. It just does exactly everything you want it to do.
I'm like 90% sure people are going to complain about this card in about a month. Because, like, you can never trust an unblocked attacker. Right? Yeah. Like after, you know what Kamigawa is going to do for everyone, right? It's going to give them trust issues because you never know what's going to happen when something goes swinging through. Ninjutsu time.
It's definitely going to be risky to not be blocking. And as we talked about before with vehicles, another reason that instant speed interaction is going to go way up in value, so you can potentially kill this before it hits you after it's ingested into play. So I mean, throw out your sorcery speed removal going into this Standard, because there's so many things that are going to punish you for playing Bloodchief's Thirst or other sorcery speed effects.
Yeah, fully.
Let's move on to number 2 on our list. We got another vehicle, 3 in the top 10, which is super exciting to me because it's been a while since we've had really good vehicles. Reckoner Bankbuster. Basically a pseudo Maze Mind's Tome that's also a 4/4 for 2 and can also make a pilot to crew it eventually after you remove all the counters. Crim, what do you think about this one?
This isn't everything you want, right? Like, this is cheap. It's card advantage, right? It's a way to get you more just like of whatever you want it to be. And then when all those counters are gone, it doesn't like sack itself or anything like that. It's just like you get a full on just more stuff. Yeah. And so like this card is just one of those things where the value of this is just going to just take over games. And with the pilot tokens able to crew it, it's like crew 3 for a 4/4 for 2 mana. That's just drawing you cards anyways, and then spawns more. That's it. Like this is all you can ask for at 2 mana. This is going above and beyond a 2 mana card here. This card is bonkers. It's one with like, it really is. Well, busting the bank, you know, because like it is pretty great.
I mean, Treasure Map, standard staple of its era. Maze Mind's Tome, standard staple. These 2 mana artifacts that generate card advantage have traditionally been very playable, and this has a huge upside. It's a massive creature. Sure, crew 3 is kind of like a high number, but eventually it's going to crew itself. I expect that this card's going to see play across a whole bunch of different archetypes. Like aggro vehicle decks will want it. You could even have more control style decks playing it more like a Maze Mind's Tome, and this eventually becomes your finisher, even if you don't have a ton of creatures, especially with the vehicle crewing land available. So I think we're going to be seeing Reckoner Bankbuster across a whole bunch of different archetypes. It just does a ridiculous amount for 2 mana, like so much text on the card. This card's so good. Let's move on. Number 1 on our list, little bit of cheating. We don't just have a card, we have an entire cycle of cards. The Channel Lands, you can see Beseiju, Atawara, 2 of the best of them, but really all of these cards, I think, are just going to see an immense amount of play in Standard. Lands and new things. Every single one. Literally every single one of them is going to be a staple. I don't even know. I'm almost at a loss of words with these cards because they're just so good and they're so stapley. But Crim, what do you think about them?
I mean, by now, how much more can we really say that hasn't already been said? These cards are absolutely nuts, right? Yeah. Like, they're untapped. They're untapped if you want them as a land. And let's talk about some of the ones that aren't even mentioned on here. The red one spawns 2 bodies, great for aggro, great for crewing vehicles. On top of that, you have the white one, which is a solid removal spell, right? Sure, why not? You have the black one. The black one might be the weakest until there's a graveyard deck. And then when there's a graveyard deck, people are going to complain about that too. So, you know what's funny? The funny thing about all of this is that I think in Standard, and the way things are going, like, the green one's not bad because it's able to blow up. Like, What's the, like, yeah, black has to be the worst one. Other than that, all of them are at the same parity, like same power level. They're just all absurd.
Yeah, and in standard, like, oh my goodness, like, I think that these cards got even better with Faceless Haven being banned because there's less of a push to have to play snow lands, so you can afford more of these. In older formats, a lot of these are cards I'm like, okay, I think one of them's kind of a free roll, but these effects are so good in standard and so efficient that I think we're going to see standard decks playing multiple. I could see 4 copies of some of these because it's going to be very hard for something like a Tuara or the red one that makes tokens or the black one in the right style of deck to ever be bad. Like, you're so fine with discarding that to get their effect that I think these cards are just going to be everywhere. They're going to be super expensive. They're going to be super strong. I think BANKBUSTER, the green one, which is the one I'm most hyped for in older formats, actually might be like kind of middle of the pack in standard. But when you consider
it just barely beats the black one.
But remember, sagas, vehicles. We have a ton of vehicles on our top list. So there are plenty of targets.
The classes.
Creature lands, so it actually does hit quite a bit. So these cards are just, they're amazingly good. They're mythic MDFCs plus, and get your playsets now, because if you're playing basically any format, you're going to want access to these cards from standard all the way back to commander. Anyway, I think that brings us to the end of our top 10 standard cards from Kamigawa Neon Dynasty. So, Crim, thanks for hanging out and doing it. It's always fun.
Thanks for having me.
And thanks for watching, everyone. And we'll be back tomorrow, I believe, to talk about our top 10 cards for the historic format. So check out our individual lists in the article linked in the description. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow, and we will talk to you soon. Looking for even more Kamigawa Neon Dynasty coverage? Well, you can find some other awesome videos right here and here.